In recent weeks, a phrase that was dismissed as speculation just a year ago has begun to resonate louder in international circles. China is preparing to take control of Taiwan. The tone of reports no longer resembles routine rhetoric. The military, economic, and informational elements are aligning too precisely, as if someone had pressed a synchronization button. Chinese military sources close to the command of the Eastern Theater of the PLA describe the current situation as the final stage of long-term preparations. It is about creating conditions under which an operation to reclaim the island could begin at any moment, either under the pretext of a provocation or in response to a supposed threat from the United States. Satellite images analyzed by independent researchers and Western intelligence agencies show a sharp increase in activity along the Fujian coast, directly opposite the Taiwan Strait. In recent months, China has deployed dozens of amphibious ships, transport barges, unmanned platforms, and tank battalions to the area. These maneuvers are accompanied by the construction of temporary fuel bases and the expansion of military airfields that could support landing operations. According to analysts from Bloomberg Intelligence, the scale of mobilization indicates not just a show of force, but readiness for a multi-phase operation involving a naval blockade, missile pressure, and limited troop landings on the island's shores. At the same time, Beijing is conducting an active information campaign at home. China Central Television regularly airs segments about restoring historical justice and the need for a final resolution of the Taiwan question. Retired generals appear on broadcasts claiming that the window of opportunity for reclaiming the island is narrowing and that any delay could endanger national security. This is more than propaganda. It is the conditioning of public opinion. Analysts note that such a tone has always preceded major political or military steps by Beijing. In Washington, concerns are growing that China may exploit a moment when the United States is distracted by internal crises and conflicts on other fronts. According to Politico, the administration is discussing scenarios of partial involvement in which American forces would act indirectly through the supply of weapons, intelligence sharing, and support for regional allies. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is strengthening the presence of its ships near the Philippines and Guam, establishing what it calls a line of deterrence. On the surface, it may look like an ordinary diplomatic game: statements, counter-statements, and military exercises. But in reality, China is rehearsing a sequence of actions resembling a hybrid blitzkrieg. According to insiders in NATO analytical circles, Beijing is ready to apply a model similar to the one the Kremlin used in Crimea: a combination of information warfare, cyber attacks, and sudden military pressure. Only in the case of Taiwan, it will be larger in scale, more technologically sophisticated, and far more dangerous. At the same time, pressure is intensifying on the economic front. The United States has expanded the list of Chinese companies subject to export restrictions, including manufacturers of microchips, drones, and optical systems. In response, China has suspended several supplies of rare earth metals, which has already driven up prices in the global electronics market. The economic confrontation is gradually turning into a political one, and from there, into a strategic standoff. Experts believe that this combination of economic and military pressure resembles the final months preceding major conflicts of the 20th century. Particular attention is being drawn to changes in China's military doctrine. Recent documents published by the Chinese Ministry of Defense formally address the defense of territorial integrity, but the text repeatedly uses the term reunification with Taiwan. Certain sources claim that the new operational guidelines allow for limited use of force without an official declaration of war. This effectively legalizes the sudden start of an operation under the guise of retaliatory actions. Intelligence services in Japan and South Korea report an unprecedented level of activity by the Chinese Air Force. Dozens of flights near Taiwan's identification zone. Taiwanese pilots are already operating in constant standby mode, and the country's Navy has announced readiness for immediate defense at the first signs of an amphibious threat. Meanwhile, Western analysts note that Beijing may begin the operation not with a massive strike, but with a blockade, cutting off sea routes, applying economic suffocation, and gradually imposing control. Chinese hacker groups, formerly unaffiliated with the state, but in fact controlled by the Ministry of State Security, have been conducting targeted cyber attacks against Taiwan's infrastructure for several months. These attacks affect not only military networks, but also civilian sectors, energy, transportation, and banking systems. Analysts point out that such actions are typical of the battlefield preparation phase, when a country creates conditions for the rapid destabilization of its opponent. Washington understands this and has publicly warned its allies that large-scale cyber attacks could be the first sign of an operation's beginning. Meanwhile, the economic picture complements the military one. China is rapidly shifting its industry towards self-sufficiency, building up strategic reserves of fuel, grain, microchips, and rare earth metals. Experts see this as a classic sign of preparation for a period of sanctions and trade blockade. Sources within Shanghai's business circles claim that the largest state-owned companies have been instructed to switch to resilience mode, meaning minimizing external dependencies and preparing for a potential cutoff from Western payment systems. All of this forms parts of the same chain. While Western diplomats discuss yet another round of sanctions, China acts systematically. Control over information flows is tightening, access to foreign media is being restricted, and new censorship measures are being introduced on social networks. Beijing is clearly striving for full manageability of the internal information space, enabling it to instantly reshape public perception of any event if needed. In the event of an operation, this will allow it to present the move not as aggression, but as a forced restoration of justice. On the international stage, China is actively working with its BRICS and SCO partners, seeking in advance to secure neutral positions from countries of the global south. Beijing is trying to persuade its allies that the operation to return Taiwan is a strictly internal matter that requires no external interference. According to insiders, several Asian and African states have already communicated through diplomatic channels that they will not support Western sanctions against China. At the same time, military analysts note that China's actions are becoming increasingly coordinated. There is synchronized activity among the Navy, Air Force, and missile forces. The PLA is intensifying its exercises in the East China Sea and South China Sea, including the use of next-generation unmanned systems. These include autonomous underwater drones and remotely operated amphibious platforms capable of landing troops without direct crew participation. According to Western intelligence, China has already deployed such systems in coastal waters and is conducting real-time testing. Against this backdrop, Taiwan is in a state of permanent alert. The government has strengthened air defenses, introduced round-the-clock surveillance, and expanded reserve fuel and food storage. However, doubts are growing within the island itself, whether its economy can withstand a prolonged blockade. Beijing is in no hurry to launch a direct attack. It is enough to gradually strangle Taiwan economically by cutting off sea routes and energy supplies. This is a quiet siege, designed not for days, but for months. In Washington's expert circles, there is growing consensus that if Beijing truly decides on a forceful scenario, it will not be a spontaneous gamble, but a carefully calculated move coordinated with its internal economy, diplomacy, and propaganda. China is not seeking a quick victory. It is preparing for a long-term conflict that wears down its opponents economically. Its strategy is not an attack for effect, but a transformation of reality in which the Taiwan question simply ceases to be disputed. And although the operation has not officially begun, everything indicates that its first phase is already underway, quietly, without gunfire, but with a precision that leaves no doubt. China is indeed preparing to take Taiwan.